It's always the same. The same streets, the same houses, the same faces. Yet, in this picture-perfect town, behind every smiling mother and every carefully pressed PTA uniform, a storm brews. I'm Jane, 33 years old, and for all intents and purposes, my life is what most people would call perfect. But I'll tell you something, perfect isn't always enough. I wake up at 6:30 a.m. every weekday without fail. The soft hum of my alarm is the first sound I hear, pulling me out of the shallow, restless sleep that I've come to expect. The clock ticks away silently as I stretch in bed, my mind already racing through the day ahead. The kids will need to be fed, dressed, and shipped off to school. My husband, Mark, will leave for work, and I'll be left in the house with a list of chores and tasks that never seem to end. I should be thankful for this life. I am thankful for it. I have everything most women in this town want. A comfortable home, a hard-working husband, 2 healthy children, and a life that looks like it's straight out of a magazine. But somewhere along the way, I've lost myself. Or perhaps I was never fully found. I roll out of bed and pull on the oversized cardigan that's become my uniform for these early mornings. The smell of coffee drifts from the kitchen, and the comforting sound of the breakfast news plays quietly in the background. I can hear the kids bickering in the next room, their voices muffled by the thick walls of our suburban home. They're good kids, of course. Too good. Maybe that's part of the problem. Mom, I can't find my shoes. Where's my math book? I left it on the kitchen table. I laugh, though it's forced. This is the part of the day I've mastered, getting everything in order before the chaos of the day really begins. Breakfast, packing lunches, making sure homework is in the right backpack, checking that the permission slips are signed, and so on. I move like a robot, mechanically ticking off the tasks that define my existence. It's the same routine every morning. By the time I send them off to school, I've become the version of myself that the world expects me to be. The dutiful wife, the perfect mother, the PTA mom who is always at every meeting, organizing fundraisers, and participating in every event. It's exhausting, but at least on the surface it looks good. Mark is in the kitchen when I finish packing the kids' lunches. He's already in his work clothes, button-up shirt, tailored slacks, perfectly combed hair. He flashes me that familiar smile, the kind that has always reassured me that I'm doing everything right. He leans over and kisses me on the cheek. Have a good day, hon. I'll be home by 6. It's a routine as old as our marriage, one that doesn't require much thought. But something about it feels distant now, like we've both become actors in a play, reading from the same tired script. We've been together for 12 years, and I know him. He knows me. But somewhere in the back of my mind I wonder, when did we stop truly seeing each other? It's a question I'm afraid to answer. The school bell rings at 8 a.m., and I'm off, pulling into the parking lot, my minivan full of PTA flyers and notes for the teachers. I park in my usual spot, second row closest to the entrance. As I step out of the van, I can already hear the chatter of the other moms. It's like a well-oiled machine, everyone falling into place. In this crowd, I am just another face. A smiling, friendly face, of course, but one that feels just a little bit too worn out to truly be seen. Morning, Jane. Hi, Jane. Did you see the new fundraiser proposal? I think we should do it. How's Mark? I heard he was working late last week. I smile and nod, exchanging pleasantries, but inside, I feel more and more disconnected from these women. They talk about their perfect lives, about their husbands' promotions, their children's straight A's, their next vacation to the Bahamas. They have it all. At least, that's how it seems. But what no one says aloud is that these lives are just as fragile as mine. The only difference is they're better at pretending. We file into the PTA meeting, where I take my usual seat at the front. The principal is talking about new school policies, and the room is filled with murmurs of approval. No one is really paying attention, but we're all here, aren't we? Just going through the motions. Even I am. Especially I am. It's then that I notice him. I'm not sure why it's different today. Maybe it's the way he's leaning against the doorframe, his arms crossed, his eyes scanning the room, as if he's seen it all before, but is still searching for something. His name is Greg, one of the new parents, a recent addition to the school community. He's tall, broad-shouldered, with a jawline that's a little too sharp to be real. The kind of man who doesn't seem to need to try to stand out, but does anyway. He's been in and out of PTA meetings, mostly attending as a courtesy to his wife, I assume. But today something's different. He catches my eye for a moment, and I quickly look away, feeling an odd flutter in my stomach that I haven't felt in years. Maybe I'm imagining things. After all, I'm happily married. Or at least I should be. The meeting proceeds, but I can't shake the feeling that something's changed. I glance at Greg again, and this time he smiles, just a quick, knowing smile. It's small, but enough to make me wonder if he knows something about me that I don't even know about myself. After the meeting, I linger to clean up a bit, shuffling papers, organizing the leftover flyers. And that's when it happens. Greg approaches me. "Hey, Jane, right?" His voice is low, casual, but there's something in the way he says my name that makes me feel seen. For the first time in a long time. "Yeah, that's me," I reply a little too quickly. "How's it going?" "Good, good. Just wanted to say, you're doing a great job with the PTA. I'm sure the school really appreciates all your hard work." It's such a simple compliment. So ordinary. So routine. But it lands differently with him. His smile lingers for just a second too long, and I can feel my heart beat a little faster. This is stupid, I tell myself. You're married. You have 2 kids. You can't go down this road. It's just a compliment, nothing more. But in the back of my mind, a thought grows, a tiny seed that whispers, what if I could have something more? The line between what you want and what you need is thinner than you think. I'd lived my whole life playing by the rules. I was the good wife, the dutiful mother, the PTA mom who kept everything in its perfect place. But one look from Greg, and everything I thought I knew about myself crumbled. I wanted more than what I had. And for the first time in years, I was willing to risk it. The days after that PTA meeting felt heavier. The weight of Greg's smile, the lingering gaze, clung to me like a memory I couldn't shake. My mind spun as I played the meeting over and over in my head. He was charming, yes. But was there something more to it? Was it just a simple compliment? Or was he interested in me? I told myself it was nothing. It had to be nothing. After all, I was happily married. I had Mark, my steady, reliable husband. I had the life that so many people envied. I was a picture of suburban perfection. And yet, every time I passed by the school, every time I saw Greg in the parking lot, that voice inside my head grew louder, more insistent. What if? What if I let myself go? What if I took a chance, stepped outside the comfortable, predictable life I'd built for myself? I tried to ignore it. I did. But one Tuesday afternoon, 3 days after that PTA meeting, I saw him again. He was leaning against his car, talking to another dad as I walked past the school gate. He caught my eye again, and this time, instead of looking away, I held his gaze. Just for a moment. He smiled, that same knowing smile, the one that sent a shiver down my spine. My heart skipped a beat. I should have walked away, gone straight to my van and driven home. But I didn't. I took a step closer, and before I knew it, I was standing next to him. "Hey, Jane," he said, his voice warm, smooth, with just a hint of mischief. "How's everything? How's the PTA going?" "It's good," I replied, my words coming out a little breathless. I was trying to act normal, but my pulse was racing. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. "Busy but good." "I bet," he said with a small chuckle, stepping a little closer. "I don't know how you manage all this. You seem to do it all so well." I looked up at him, really looked at him. He was so much taller than Mark, his shoulders broad and strong, his jawline chiseled. His eyes were dark, but there was something behind them that made me feel like he was seeing through me, into a place I hadn't even realized existed. I shifted uncomfortably, feeling the tension building between us, but I couldn't pull away. I didn't want to. There was something magnetic about him, something I couldn't explain. Something that made me forget the rules I'd lived by for so long. Well, it's what we do, right? I said, trying to lighten the mood. I laughed, but it was forced. The words sounded too rehearsed. Just keeping up with everything. He smiled, and for the first time, I noticed how genuine it was. How real. His gaze softened as he looked at me, and for a moment, the rest of the world seemed to disappear. There was only him, and me, and the thick unspoken tension that hung in the air. He said slowly, if you ever need help with any of the PTA stuff, or just want to grab a coffee and talk about life, he trailed off, his voice low, and the implication was clear. My heart pounded in my chest, and I found myself nodding before I could stop myself. I think that would be nice, I said, my voice softer than I intended. Great. How about tomorrow? His smile grew wider, and I saw something in his eyes that made my breath catch. Something daring, something dangerous. Tomorrow. Just a coffee. I told myself it was innocent. Just two people talking. Just a casual conversation between parents. Nothing to worry about. But as I walked back to my van, my stomach was in knots. This wasn't a conversation. This wasn't just coffee. I could feel the attraction building inside me. A dangerous mix of desire and curiosity that I couldn't ignore. And deep down, I knew that once I crossed this line, there would be no going back. That night, I tried to focus on my family. Mark came home as usual, right on time, looking every bit the loving husband. We had dinner, we watched TV, we went through the motions. But my mind wasn't there. It was already with Greg. Mark kissed me goodnight, and I kissed him back, but it felt empty. The life we had built together, it was good, but it was also so routine. And right now it felt like a cage. I needed something else, something more. I needed to feel alive again. The next day, I showed up at the coffee shop with a nervous excitement in my chest. I kept telling myself that I was being foolish, that this was just a harmless meeting between two parents who happened to have some things in common. Nothing more. But deep down I knew better. I walked in and saw Greg sitting at a corner table already waiting. He stood up as soon as he saw me, his eyes lighting up as if he had been waiting for this moment. Jane, he said, his voice warm, like we were already old friends. It's so good to see you. Thanks for inviting me, I replied, forcing myself to sound casual. But I was anything but casual. My heart was racing, and I could feel the tension building again, just like it had the day before. We sat down and ordered coffee. Small talk followed, and we laughed about the usual PTA nonsense. But the more we talked, the more I felt the distance between us shrinking. Every time our eyes met, the air seemed to thicken with something unspoken. He leaned in a little closer, his arm brushing against mine, sending sparks of electricity through my body. Greg said, his voice dropping lower. I've been meaning to tell you, Jane. You're even more beautiful than I imagined. His words hit me like a wave. They were simple, but the way he said them made my heart race. I couldn't remember the last time anyone had looked at me like that. Really looked at me, as if I was more than just a mom, more than just a wife. And that was it. That was the moment everything changed. The moment I realized I was no longer playing by the rules. The moment I crossed a line I never thought I'd cross. The moment you step outside the life you can never fully step back in. It's like touching fire. At first it's warm, almost comforting. But as you keep getting closer, the heat becomes unbearable. And before you know it, you're burning. I knew I was playing with fire, But I couldn't stop. Greg made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. And that was something I wasn't ready to let go of. The days after that coffee meeting felt surreal. It was like living in two worlds. The one where I was still Jane, the perfect wife, the PTA mom, the woman who cooked dinner, helped with homework, and kissed her husband goodnight. And the other world, the one where I could still feel Greg's eyes on me, the warmth of his touch still lingering on my skin. I was stuck between the two, torn between the life I had built and the intoxicating possibility of something more. I knew I had crossed a line, but did I want to turn back? That Friday, Greg texted me, "Hey Jane, had a great time the other day. Would you like to meet up again? I know a place nearby that's pretty quiet, no distractions. Just us." The message sent a jolt through me. Just us. My heart pounded, my thoughts scattered. My first instinct was to say no, to shut it down. I was married. I had a family. But the pull of temptation was too strong. "Yes, I'd like that," I typed, before I could stop myself. The night came quicker than I expected. I had to juggle 1,000 thoughts in my head. Should I tell Mark I was going out? Should I make up an excuse? The lies felt like a weight on my chest. But it didn't matter. I was already in too deep. I had already decided, in that brief moment when I hit send on that text, that I was going. I told Mark I was going to meet a friend from the PTA to discuss upcoming school events. He didn't ask any questions, just kissed me on the cheek and told me to have a good time. I left the house, my heart racing with every step I took towards my car. When I arrived at the restaurant, Greg was already waiting. The low light of the dimly lit bar cast shadows across his face, but I could still see the glint in his eyes as he watched me walk toward him. He stood up when I reached the table, his smile warm, welcoming. "You look stunning," he said, his voice as smooth as silk. I flushed, caught off guard by his words. There was no pretending now, no hiding behind the PTA mom facade. I was here, and I was not here to talk about school events. We ordered drinks, and for a while we talked casually, about everything and nothing, about work, about life. But the more we talked, the more I felt the tension building between us. It wasn't just the words anymore. It was everything. The way he looked at me, the way he touched his glass, the way his hand lingered just a little too long on mine when he reached for the bottle. Every small thing felt charged, electric. Then the moment came. We were sitting across from each other, the distance between us closing slowly, almost imperceptibly. Greg leaned forward, his gaze never leaving mine. He spoke in a low voice, the words heavy with intent. "Jane," he said, his eyes dark, "I've been thinking about you, about this, about us, and I can't stop." I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I had expected the words in some way, but hearing them out loud, so direct, made my heart race. "Greg, I'm not sure," I began, but he cut me off gently, his fingers brushing my hand again, sending a wave of heat through my body. "You don't have to say anything yet," he said softly. "I just want you to know that I can't stop thinking about you, and I think you feel it too." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. He knew. He knew exactly what I was feeling. I didn't reply right away. I couldn't. My mind was a storm of conflicting thoughts. I was married. I had responsibilities. But this felt different. With Mark, I was secure. We had built a life together. But somewhere along the way, I had lost the spark. With Greg, everything was new, exciting, and forbidden. And there was something thrilling about it. I looked at him, really looked at him. The way his jaw clenched when he spoke. The way his lips curved up in that sly grin. I had never been this close to temptation before. And I wasn't sure if I could pull away. "I feel it," I whispered, almost afraid to say the words. But I hesitated. It was more than just my marriage. It was my life, my identity. I couldn't just throw it away. Could I? "You don't have to choose yet," Greg said, leaning closer, his breath warm against my skin. "We can take it slow. But I need you to know, Jane. This is real. And I'm not going to let you walk away without knowing what this could be." That was the moment. That was the moment I knew I was in. There was no turning back. The idea of taking it slow was a lie. The moment I let myself feel this way, the moment I let myself cross that line, I was already committed to this. Whatever this was. After a few moments of silence, Greg stood up. He didn't say anything, but the look in his eyes told me everything. I was already lost in him, and he knew it. He took my hand gently and led me outside to his car. I didn't resist. I couldn't. We didn't talk on the way to his apartment. The air in the car was thick, heavy with anticipation. My heart beat in my chest, faster with each passing second. This was real. It was happening. When we arrived, he opened the door for me. I stepped out, my legs shaky, my mind reeling. As soon as I stepped inside, he closed the door behind me, and without a word he kissed me. It was nothing like the slow, careful kisses I had shared with Mark. This was hungry, desperate. A kiss that told me everything I needed to know. This was the first step. The moment I realized there was no going back. The moment I knew I had stepped into a world I could never leave. Greg's apartment felt nothing like the life I had built with Mark. The dim lights, the scent of his cologne lingering in the air, the quiet intimacy that seemed to envelop the room. It was all so intoxicating. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was performing. I wasn't pretending to be the perfect mother, the perfect wife, the perfect friend. I was just Jane, and that in that moment was enough. Greg didn't speak. He didn't have to. His hand brushed mine again, and it sent another surge of heat through my body. I didn't stop him. I didn't pull away. My breath came faster, my pulse quickening, as his lips found mine once more. This time, there was no hesitation, no questioning. This was it. He led me to the couch without saying a word, his lips never leaving mine. The world outside his apartment, the school, my family, the life I had so carefully built, disappeared. All that mattered was the heat between us, the way his hands moved over my body, how he made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. I wanted to pull away. I wanted to stop myself. I wanted to be the woman I had been just a few hours ago. The woman who would never betray her husband. The mother who would never do something like this. But when Greg kissed me again, when his touch became more insistent, more urgent, those thoughts faded into the background. I was losing myself in him. In us. At some point, our clothes became irrelevant. We were tangled in each other. The world outside this small apartment nothing, but a distant memory. I wasn't thinking about the consequences anymore. I wasn't thinking about Mark. I wasn't thinking about my kids. All I could think about was Greg. His hands, his lips, the way he made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. It wasn't until after it happened that I realized the full weight of what I had done. The rush of desire faded, and with it came a tidal wave of guilt. I had crossed a line. I had done something I couldn't take back. Greg lay next to me on the couch, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my skin. His breath was steady, but mine came in short, uneven bursts. My heart was pounding, and I couldn't help but feel the sting of regret creeping in. What have I done? The question lingered in my mind, but I couldn't bring myself to voice it. I didn't want to hear the answer. Greg broke the silence first. "I knew you were different," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I knew you weren't just the PTA mom. You've always been more. I saw it the moment I met you." I didn't know what to say. I wasn't sure if I should feel flattered, or if I should be repulsed. Was this really who I had become? Was this the person I wanted to be? "I'm sorry," I whispered, but I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. For what had just happened? For crossing a line I had promised myself I would never cross? Or was I apologizing because I had wanted it? Because a part of me had longed for this. For something real, something exciting, something that made me feel alive? Greg shifted, sitting up and looking at me with that intense gaze that made me feel exposed. He reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "You don't have to apologize," he said. "I'm not going anywhere. This is real, Jane. What we have, it's real." I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I didn't know what else to say. My mind was still spinning, my emotions in turmoil. The person I had been, the person who could never imagine doing something like this, was slipping away. I sat up too, suddenly feeling cold. The warmth of his body, the comfort of his presence, seemed to drain away as I realized the gravity of what I had just done. I wasn't just betraying my husband. I was betraying myself. Was I unhappy in my marriage? The thought struck me hard. Mark and I had been together for so long. We had built a life together, a family. And yet, I had allowed myself to get swept away by someone else. I didn't know the answer. Not yet. Greg seemed to sense my unease. He leaned in, kissing my cheek, his lips lingering just a moment longer than necessary. "Don't think about it too much," he said softly. "Just be with me. Be present." His words were comforting, but they didn't quiet the storm inside me. I wasn't sure I could be present, not with the guilt weighing down on me, not when I knew deep down that everything had changed. I had crossed the line. But then came the other voice, the one that whispered in the back of my mind, the voice that reminded me that maybe I wasn't the only one who was unhappy. Maybe Mark was too. Maybe there was something in my marriage that I had been missing, something I hadn't noticed because I had been so focused on the routine, so focused on being the perfect wife and mother. I didn't have the answers. Not yet. But what I did know was that everything had shifted. I was no longer the woman I had been just hours ago. The line had been crossed, and there was no going back. "What now?" I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Greg looked at me, his expression unreadable for a moment before he smiled softly, his fingers brushing against my skin once again. "We see where this goes."